Close your eyes now, my sweet friend. Let the softest rain begin to fall outside your window, each tiny drop whispering that it's safe to let go, safe to drift, safe to let my voice carry you gently into the night. Feel the cool air brushing your cheeks like an old friend who knows exactly how tired you are, how much you need this quiet moment, this slow, warm story that will wrap around you like the heaviest, softest blanket. Tonight, we're going somewhere far away from every worry. Somewhere the world grows still, and the only thing that matters is the low, sleepy rhythm of my words and the gentle patter of rain that never rushes, never demands, only cradles. You don't have to hold on to anything right now. Not a single thought, not a single tomorrow. Just let them slip away with every breath you exhale. Slow, slower, slower still. That's it. Good. So good. Tonight I'm going to tell you the story of the Shawshank Redemption, but not the way you've heard it before. No loud voices, no sudden sounds, only the quietest whispering, the kind that makes your eyelids feel deliciously heavy and your heart feels strangely light. We're going to walk through every single moment together, every shadow in the prison yard, every drop of rain that fell the night a man crawled to freedom, every tiny grain of rock dust that slipped through patient fingers for 19 long years. I'm going to paint every smell for you, the sharp sting of tar on a hot roof, the musty sweetness of old library books, the salt of the Pacific Ocean that waited so faithfully at the end. And because this is our bedtime together, I'll pause whenever you need. I'll breathe with you. I'll let the silence and the rain fill every space where worry once lived. Did you know that Stephen King, the man who first dreamed this story as a little novella called Rita Hayworth and Shawshank Redemption, sold the film rights to a young director named Frank Darabont for just $1, one single dollar, because he believed in the quiet magic Frank saw inside the pages, the same quiet magic we're holding tonight. That tiny act of trust feels like hope itself, doesn't it? Like passing a candle in the dark without asking for anything back. And have you ever felt that kind of hope? So small you could hold it in your palm, yet strong enough to keep you breathing when everything else says give up. Just notice that feeling for a moment, soft, warm, alive, then let it settle somewhere deep in your chest where it can glow all night long. Another gentle secret before we begin. The prison you're about to visit isn't really in Maine where the story pretends. It's an old reformatory in Mansfield, Ohio, so beautifully decayed that when the crew first walked in, they say the dust hung in the air like golden smoke, and the walls seemed to remember every man who ever suffered inside them. They left most of it exactly as they found it. Peeling paint, cracked windows, the faint smell of damp stone that never quite goes away. And when you hear the rain later in our story, know that some of it is real rain recorded right there on those broken roofs, falling the same way it falls for you now, soft, forgiving, endless. Let your shoulders sink a little deeper into the bed, feel how the mattress rises up to meet you, how it says you are home, you are safe, you are allowed to rest. Every muscle can loosen now, from the tiny ones around your eyes to the ones in your toes. Just let them melt, melt, melt. And as they do, let me ask you something only for you. No one else will ever hear the answer. Have you ever felt trapped? Not by walls you can touch, but by thoughts that circle and circle like guards walking the same tired path. If you have, tonight those walls are going to start crumbling, grain by grain, the same way they crumbled for a quiet banker named Andy Dufresne. And if you've never felt that kind of prison, then tonight you'll understand how precious your freedom truly is, and how gently it deserves to be held. Breathe in slowly through your nose, cool, quiet air, and breathe out through your mouth, warm, heavy, carrying everything you no longer need. Again, slower this time. Deeper. Perfect. The rain is getting a little softer now, the way it does when it knows you're almost asleep. In a moment, we'll step together into 1947, into the gray courts of Portland, Maine, where a man's life is about to change forever. But there's no hurry at all. We have all night, and the night has us. Just listen to the rain, listen to my voice, and when you're ready, truly ready, we'll begin. Let the rain stay with us now, soft and steady, the way it was falling that September evening in 1947 when a quiet, neat-handed vice president of a Portland bank named Andy Dufresne sat in his DeSoto outside a moonlit country club, a bottle of whiskey between his knees and a Smith & Wesson revolver on the seat beside him. You can almost smell the wet leaves on the windshield, the faint metallic scent of the gun oil mixing with the sharp bite of liquor every time he lifted the bottle to his lips. His hands were trembling, but not from cold. They were trembling because inside his chest something had already broken open and would never quite close again. His wife was inside that house laughing with another man, and Andy, the man who balanced numbers so perfectly, could not balance the ache of betrayal. He told himself he only wanted to scare them, but the night smells of gunpowder and crushed grass even before the trigger is pulled. 2 bodies would be found the next morning, tangled together on blood-soaked sheets, and Andy Dufresne, pale, silent, immaculate in his dark suit, would stand in court while the prosecutor painted him as cold, calculating, monstrous. Feel the polished oak of the witness box under his fingertips, the way the grain felt almost warm, as if the wood itself were trying to comfort him. He never raised his voice, never wept, only answered, "No, I didn't do it," in the same even tone he once used to approve mortgages. The jury never believed the quiet ones, never trusted eyes that refused to beg. Life sentence, 2 of them, to be served consecutively at Shawshank State Penitentiary. When the gavel fell, the sound was small, almost polite, like a librarian closing a book no one wanted to read. Now breathe with me, in slowly, out slower, and picture the bus that carried him north 2 weeks later. The windows were streaked with rain, the same gentle rain that's brushing your cheeks right now. Inside, the air smelled of wet wool and fear. Red, a man you'll come to love the way Andy did, watched the new fish through half-lidded eyes. Red could get things, cigarettes, candy, a small rock hammer no bigger than a dentist's tool. He noticed Andy immediately because Andy didn't look afraid the way the others did. He looked emptied, like someone had scooped everything out and left only stillness behind. When the guards screamed, "Fresh fish!" and the old cons howled like wolves, Andy simply stepped down onto the wet asphalt, shoes shining even in the gray light, and the rain darkened the shoulders of his cheap prison coat until it clung to him like a second skin. The first night inside is always the longest. You can feel the slam of the gates in your bones, the way the iron echoes inside the skull long after the sound has died. Andy lay on the narrow cot in cell block 5, tier 2, cell 14, staring up at the underside of the top bunk where someone had scratched, "Brooks was here years ago." The mattress smelled of mildew and old tears. Somewhere down the corridor a man sobbed himself raw. Another screamed until the guards beat him quiet. Andy listened to all of it with the same calm face he wore in court, but inside he was counting heartbeats, counting breaths, counting the tiny cracks in the ceiling that looked almost like rivers if you stared long enough. Have you ever lain awake, counting cracks, counting anything, just to keep the dark from swallowing you whole? If you have, then you already know Andy a little. Let that knowing settle gently, like dust on an old windowsill. Trivia whispered just for you. The very first scene of the movie, The Trial, was shot in a tiny courthouse in Mansfield, Ohio, and the extras in the gallery were real local people who had never acted before. The director kept the camera rolling while the judge read the verdict because he wanted the silence to feel real, and when Andy's face never changed, some of those extras actually started crying because they believed, in that moment, that a man had just lost his life. That silence you feel now between my words is the same silence they carried home with them that night. Weeks became months. The routine of Shawshank is a slow grinding wheel. Breakfast slop that tastes of tin and despair. The march to the laundry where steam clings to your skin like guilt. The yard where men walk in circles and pretend they're going somewhere. Andy kept his head down, but the sisters noticed him anyway. Boggs, Rooster, all of them, predators who smelled new meat. The first time they dragged him into the projection booth, the film rattling overhead, was Gilda, Rita Hayworth, laughing on the screen, while fists and boots found Andy's ribs. You can smell the projector oil thick and hot, hear the wet thud of knuckles on flesh, feel the way the floor scraped his cheek raw. He never screamed, only made a small sound like air leaving a punctured tire. When it was over, he lay there tasting copper, feeling the sticky warmth of blood in his hair, and something inside him quietly closed a door and locked it forever. But here is the first tiny seed of hope, so small you could miss it if you blinked. Red asked for a rock hammer, just a little thing to shape chess pieces, and Andy paid with 3 cigarettes and a look that said thank you without words. When the hammer arrived, wrapped in cotton, Andy held it like it was made of glass. The metal was cool, the handle smooth, and when he tapped it gently against the wall of his cell that first night, the sound was no louder than a heartbeat. Tap, 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 like rain on a distant roof. Did you hear that? That was the beginning. 19 years would pass before the world understood what that tiny sound really meant. Let your own heartbeat slow to match it now. In, out, in, out. Good. Have you ever held something so small in your hand and known, deep down, that it could change everything? Maybe it was a letter you never sent, a phone call you finally made, a single word you dared to speak. Feel that memory for just a moment, soft and warm, then let it drift away with the rain. Let the rain grow a little heavier now, the way it did in the spring of 1949 when Andy Dufresne sat alone on the bleachers in the prison yard, sunlight finally breaking through after weeks of gray, and heard the new guard, Byron Hadley, complaining about the inheritance tax he had to pay on the $35,000 his dead brother left him. The air smelled of wet earth and cheap cigarettes, and Andy's shoes were still caked with laundry soap from the morning shift. He didn't move at first, only listened, the way a man listens to distant thunder that might decide to come closer. Then, very quietly, he spoke the first words anyone in Shawshank had heard him say in weeks. "Do you trust your wife?" Hadley spun around, face purple, ready to beat the insolence out of this skinny con, but Andy never raised his voice. He offered, in that same calm, almost sleepy tone, to help Hadley keep every cent legally, if the guards would bring 3 beers each to the men tarring the plate factory roof. Just 3 beers apiece for 10 men working under the sun. Hadley stared, then laughed, a short, brutal bark, and the deal was made. Up on the roof the next day, the sky was so blue it hurt to look at it. The tar smelled thick and sweet like burnt molasses, and it bubbled gently under the brushes. When the beers arrived, cold bottles sweating in the heat, the other prisoners took theirs with shaking hands, afraid it was a trick. Andy didn't drink his. He sat on the edge of the roof, legs dangling over a 3-story drop, and held the bottle between his palms, feeling the condensation run down his wrists like tiny rivers. Red asked him years later why he didn't drink, and Andy answered, "Because I wanted to remember what it felt like to give something away." Can you feel that moment? The sun warm on the back of your neck, the bottle cool in your hands, the taste of freedom that has nothing to do with bars or walls. Just breathe it in, slowly, slowly, let it settle behind your eyes. Trivia whispered so softly only you can hear. The beer scene was shot in one take because the actors were given real beer. And after the 3rd or 4th rehearsal, the director noticed they were getting a little too happy. So he said, "Action, let them drink once," and that single perfect take became legend. Tim Robbins never swallowed a drop. He just held it and smiled, the smallest smile you've ever seen, the smile of a man tasting something he thought was lost forever. Word of Andy's tax magic spread faster than lice. Guards lined up outside his cell with forms and questions, offering protection from the sisters in return. The warden himself, Samuel Norton, a thin-lipped Bible-quoting hypocrite with eyes like winter ponds, summoned Andy to his office. The room smelled of lemon polish and old paper, and the warden's desk was so shiny Andy could see his own hollow face reflected back. Norton offered him a job in the library, a soft job, and a new cellmate to keep the predators away. Andy accepted without blinking, but inside he was already measuring distances, counting steps, listening to the way sound traveled through pipes and vents, and the hollow hearts of men who believed they owned other men. The library started as 2 crates of mildewed books in a storage room that smelled of mouse nests and despair. Andy wrote letters every week, polite, patient letters to the state senate asking for funds. For 2 years, the replies were thin and negative, until one afternoon in 1953, a truck backed up to the gate and unloaded boxes of books, a pool table, a record player, and $300 in cash. Andy stood in the doorway watching dust motes dance in the light, and for the first time in years his hands shook with something that wasn't fear. He ran his fingers over the leather spines the way you might touch a lover you never thought you'd see again. Reflection, just between us. Have you ever written a letter you weren't sure anyone would answer? Poured your heart into it anyway? And then one ordinary day the answer arrived like sunrise? If you have, you know how Andy felt when those boxes came. If you haven't, maybe tonight is the night to write that letter in your mind. Seal it with a slow breath, and let the rain carry it where it needs to go. Brooks Hatlin had been the librarian for 50 years. His hands were soft and trembling, the skin thin as onion paper, and he knew every book by the smell of its pages. When Andy started expanding the room, knocking out a wall, painting the new space the color of butter left too long in the sun, Brooks watched with frightened eyes. Change is the only true terror for a man institutionalized. One morning Brooks held a knife to Haywood's throat in the mess hall, because the thought of parole, of leaving the only home he understood, was worse than dying. They talked him down, sent him out anyway, and months later a letter came. Brooks was gone, hanged himself in a lonely rooming house, a crow he used to feed perched outside the window watching him swing. Andy read the letter aloud in the library, while the rain tapped the high windows like it was trying to get in. His voice never wavered, but the hand holding the paper was white at the knuckles. Another tiny secret. The crow in the movie was real. His name was Jake, and Morgan Freeman fed him mealworms between takes, so he would sit quietly on Brooks's shoulder. When Jake died years later, the crew buried him behind the old prison with a little marker that simply says Jake, Brooks's friend. Even crows understand friendship better than some people. That night, Andy sat alone in the darkened library, running his fingers over the new card catalog he had built, smelling fresh ink and sawdust and the faint vanilla scent old books give off when they're finally loved again. Somewhere in the walls, the rock hammer kept its patient rhythm, tap, 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 softer than breathing. And outside, the rain kept falling, washing the world clean for men who weren't allowed to feel clean anymore. Let your own breathing match that rhythm now. Slow, steady, endless. In, out, perfect. Let the rain ease into the gentlest drizzle now, the kind that kisses the windows instead of beating them, because we are moving into the softest, most dangerous years, the years when hope learned to hide inside ordinary things. It is the late 1950s and early 1960s, and Andy Dufresne has become the quiet center of Shawshank. His hair has started to thin at the temples, a few silver threads catching the weak light when he bends over tax forms in the warden's office. The smell in that office never changes. Lemon oil, Norton's cheap aftershave, the faint metallic tang of fear from whichever guard is waiting to be told how much of his paycheck he can keep. Andy's fingers move across the numbers like they're playing a silent piano only he can hear. Outside the frosted glass, the corridor smells of boiled cabbage and bleach, but inside the library the air is warmer, thick with paper and glue, and the faint sweetness of the checkerboard cake someone's mother sent from home. Every Sunday afternoon after count, the library becomes a small island of peace. Men sit shoulder to shoulder on benches Andy built himself, their rough fingers turning pages they never thought they'd touch again. Floyd reads aloud from Treasure Island, in a slow, careful voice, stumbling over the long words but never stopping. Haywood traces the pictures in a National Geographic with one cracked fingernail whispering "God damn" every time he sees a new animal. Andy moves among them like a quiet librarian ghost, pressing a book into this hand, sliding a magazine into that one, never raising his voice above the soft rustle of pages. Sometimes he stops behind a man who can't read and reads the words for him so softly that only that one prisoner hears. And the man sits a little straighter, eyes shining with something close to pride. Trivia, breathed only for you. The library scenes were shot in the actual prison chapel because it was the only room big enough with natural light. Every single book you see on screen was donated by crew members and local libraries. When filming wrapped, they left them all behind for the inmates who were still there. Some of those books are still in use today, spines cracked open exactly where Tim Robbins once rested his hand. One evening in 1963, a new shipment arrives, a box of classical records. Andy unwraps them like sacred things, his fingertips brushing the glossy covers of Mozart, Beethoven, and then, wrapped in tissue, a recording of La Noce de Figaro, the duet Solaria. He places it on the turntable the way a priest lifts the host. The needle drops, and for 3 minutes and 22 seconds the entire prison falls silent. The guards in the towers stop walking. The men in the laundry let the steam settle on their skin without moving. Two women's voices float through the speakers, pure and impossible, singing about a letter carried on the breeze. Andy sits very still, eyes closed, a single tear sliding from the corner of one eye and hanging on his jaw like a diamond. When the record ends, the warden storms in, face purple, screaming about regulations, but for those 3 minutes, the walls themselves had stopped listening to him. Reflection, soft as candlelight. Have you ever heard a piece of music that felt like someone reaching through your ribcage and touching the exact place that hurts? If you have, you were inside that prison with Andy, even if you were only 8 years old listening on a scratchy radio in your bedroom. Let that memory rise now, gentle, painless. Then let it drift away on the same breeze the duet rode. That night the sisters catch him again. They have been waiting. 3 of them this time, Boggs in the lead, grinning with broken teeth. They drag Andy into the storage room behind the license plate press. The air is thick with oil and hot metal. You can smell the fear sweat under Andy's arms when they rip his shirt. The first blow splits his lip. The second cracks a rib. He curls on the concrete tasting blood and dust, and for the first time he makes a sound. Not a scream, just a small animal whimper that seems to come from somewhere outside his body. Weeks later, Boggs is found in the infirmary, beaten so badly he'll never walk again. No one saw who did it, but every guard on Norton's payroll suddenly finds a crisp $20 bill in his locker. Andy never speaks of it. He simply limps back to his cell, washes the blood from his mouth with cold water that tastes of rust, and goes on writing his weekly letters for library money, as though nothing happened. Another secret. The beating scene was so realistic that the on-set medic rushed forward when they yelled cut, thinking Tim Robbins was actually injured. Tim just lay there for a long moment, eyes open to the ceiling, breathing through the pain because he didn't want to break the moment. When he finally sat up, the whole crew was crying. Years slide by like pages in a book you don't want to finish. In 1965, Tommy Williams arrives, a cocky kid with slicked back hair and a grin that still believes in second chances. He tells Andy over dishwater coffee in the cafeteria that he once shared a cell with the real man who killed Andy's wife and her lover, a petty thief named Elmo Blatch who bragged about it. Andy's hands go very still around the chipped mug. For the first time in almost 20 years, the emptiness inside him fills with something sharp and bright. Possibility. He goes to Norton, lays the story out calmly, asks for a new trial. Norton listens from behind his polished desk, Bible open to the verse about meekness inheriting the earth, and refuses. Worse, he has Tommy transferred to a minimum security farm upstate the very next week, and 2 days later Tommy is shot trying to escape. The report is neat, official, final. That night, Andy sits on his bunk, staring at the Rita Hayworth poster on his wall, the one that replaced Raquel Welch, the one that replaced Marilyn. His eyes are dry, but something inside him quietly dies. Let your own breath slow to match his that night. In, out, nothing. In, out, nothing. Good. Let the rain return now, not the soft drizzle anymore, but the kind of storm that remembers every wrong and wants to wash the world clean. It is the night of March 12, 1967. And the thunder rolls low across the main hills like God clearing his throat. Inside cell block 5, the lights have just gone out for the count. The guards are drinking coffee in the tower, boots propped on the rail, complaining about the weather. Lightning flickers through the high barred windows. and for one heartbeat the entire tier is lit white, every face caught mid-breath, every shadow sharp as a blade. Then darkness swallows everything again, except for one cell, Tier 2, Cell 14, where Andy Dufresne sits very straight on the edge of his bunk, fully dressed, shoes polished to a soft glow even in the dark. His hands rest calmly on his knees, but if you were close enough you would feel the smallest tremor running through his wrists, like a tuning fork finally allowed to sing. Earlier that evening he had done something no one noticed. He asked Red for a length of rope. 6 feet of plain white clothesline, the kind used to hang laundry in the yard. Red handed it over without question because Andy's eyes were different tonight, bright and far away, the way a man's eyes look when he's already on the other side of something. Red thought he understood. He thought Andy was planning to hang himself. He even rehearsed the words he would say tomorrow when they found the body, but Andy only smiled, small and secret, and folded the rope into a neat coil inside his sweater. The storm grows louder. Rain lashes the windows in sheets, drumming on the tin roof of the guard tower like thrown gravel. In the darkness, Andy stands, slow and deliberate, and unbuttons his prison shirt. Underneath he is wearing a second shirt, crisp white, and a silk tie the color of midnight. He has kept them hidden for months, pressed between the pages of a ledger in the warden's office. Now he slips into the rest of the suit, charcoal gray, perfectly tailored once upon a lifetime ago, the fabric still holding the faint scent of cedar from the closet where it waited. He knots the tie with steady fingers, smooths the lapels, and for one moment he is the young banker again, standing outside the country club before everything went wrong. Then he reaches up and peels back the corner of the giant Raquel Welch poster that has covered his wall for the last 6 years. The paper comes away with a soft, wet sigh, revealing a hole no wider than a dinner plate, edges worn smooth from years of careful scraping. The tunnel breathes cool, damp air against his face. It smells of stone dust and earth and distant freedom. Andy ties one end of the rope around the leg of his bunk, tests the knot the way a sailor tests a lifeline, then lowers himself into the darkness. His polished shoes scrape softly against the narrow shaft he has widened grain by grain for 19 years. The walls are slick with moisture. Tiny crumbs of rock fall away under his fingers like dry bread. He moves slowly, carefully, the rope taking his weight, the storm above covering every small sound. 570 feet of sewer pipe lie ahead, a black river of human waste that has waited patiently for this one night. When he reaches the end, he will have to break through the final crust of concrete and crawl through filth you and I cannot imagine. But right now he is only thinking of the ocean, of salt wind, of a small boat with no name. Morning comes gray and stunned. The guards find the cell empty. The rope dangles like a hanged man who changed his mind. Warden Norton arrives in a fury, Bible clutched to his chest like a shield. He tears the poster from the wall and stares into the tunnel with eyes that finally understand they have been robbed. His scream echoes down the cell block, raw and animal. They follow the tunnel, 4 guards crawling on bellies through excrement that steams in the cold, until they reach the end and find the broken pipe and the place where Andy burst out into the storm like a man reborn. Lightning had struck nearby. The ground is scorched, and the stench is unbearable. But there are shoe prints leading away, polished shoes now caked with mud, heading toward the creek that swells with rain. Norton returns to his office, shaking with rage. He opens the safe behind the painting of the Last Supper to check his ledgers, the ones that hide every bribe, every kickback, every dollar he stole using Andy's name. and finds instead a pair of muddy prison shoes placed neatly side by side, a final polite insult. Taped beneath them is a single sheet of paper, the title page of the prison's accounting book, with Andy's careful handwriting across it. "Dear Warden, you were right. Salvation lay within." When Norton rips open the real ledger later, he will discover every page hollowed out, replaced with newspaper clippings about his crimes. But that comes later. Right now he stands frozen, while the state police sirens begin to wail in the distance. Red receives the news in the yard. The rain has stopped. The sky is the color of a fresh bruise. Someone whispers that Andy is gone, really gone, and Red feels something inside his chest crack open like sunrise. That night he lies on his bunk staring at the underside of the top bunk, where Brooks once carved his name, and for the first time in 30 years he cries without shame, quiet tears that taste of salt and hope. "Trivia," whispered against the fading thunder. The tunnel took the prop department 9 months to build inside the real sewer system of the prison. Tim Robbins crawled through real waste for some shots because the fake smelled too sweet. When he finally emerged, covered in filth, the crew gave him a standing ovation that lasted 5 full minutes. He just bowed, muddy shoes and all, like a man taking a curtain call. Reflection, soft as morning light. Have you ever woken up one day and realized the thing you feared most had already happened years ago, and you were still breathing? That is how Red felt when he understood Andy had not killed himself, but had chosen life so fiercely that he crawled through hell to reach it. Let that feeling settle in your own chest now, warm, steady, alive. Let the storm finally move on now, the way all storms do when their work is finished. The clouds part slowly, reluctantly, and the first pale gold of dawn slips across the wet fields of Maine like a promise that was never broken, only delayed. Somewhere far south, the Pacific waves are already lapping at white sand, warm, patient, endless. The rain that has carried us all night softens into the gentlest mist, the kind that kisses your skin and then disappears, leaving only cool freshness behind. Breathe it in with me, one last long, slow breath, filling every corner of your chest, then let it out even slower, carrying every last grain of tension with it. Good. So good. Weeks later, Red sits in the same courtroom where Andy once stood silent. The parole board asks the usual questions, and Red, older now, hair gone silver at the edges, gives them the answer he has given twice before. Rehearsed, hollow, meaningless. Then something shifts inside him, the way a compass needle trembles when it finally finds true north. He looks up and speaks from somewhere deeper than memory. He tells them about Andy, about the beers on the roof that tasted like freedom, about 2 women singing through prison speakers on a Sunday afternoon, about a man who crawled through 500 yards of foulness and came out clean on the other side. When he finishes, there is silence in the room, the same silence that fell when the opera played. The stamp comes down. Approved. Red walks out into sunlight that feels brand new, terrified and trembling like Brooks once did, but carrying something Brooks never had. A postcard with no message, only a postmark from a tiny town on the Mexican coast. He breaks parole the way you or I might break a diet on the first warm day of spring. He rides buses south, thumbing the last stretch when the money runs out, sleeping under trees that smell of salt and pine. The closer he gets to the border, the lighter his steps become. He crosses into Texas at McAllen, buys a battered hat to keep the sun from his eyes, and keeps walking. One morning he stands on a hill looking down at Zihuatanejo. Turquoise water so bright it hurts, fishing boats bobbing like toys, and there on the beach, a small figure in rolled-up khakis is sanding the hull of a boat that has no name yet. Red's heart stops, then starts again. Faster, younger, alive. He walks down the sand path, shoes in his hand, feeling every warm grain between his toes. And when he is close enough, Andy turns. Face brown from the sun, eyes exactly the same calm gray they always were, and smiles the smile Red has carried inside him for 40 years. They embrace without words, two old men holding each other like the last two passengers of a ship that finally reached shore. The Pacific stretches out behind them, glittering, endless, forgiving. Red thinks, I hope the Pacific is as blue as it has been in my dreams. Andy answers, voice low and warm against his shoulder. I hope. Trivia, the very last one whispered only for you before we say goodnight. The final beach scene was shot at the real Zihuatanejo, but the crew had to wait 3 full days for the sky to turn exactly that shade of perfect blue. On the 4th morning, the clouds parted at dawn, and the light was so beautiful that half the crew cried behind the camera. When Morgan Freeman and Tim Robbins hugged for the final take, they held it long after the director called cut, because neither wanted to let go. The film you love ends on that hug frozen in time. But in real life, they stood there for almost a minute. Two friends who had walked through hell together, and found the other side still waiting. Reflection, the gentlest one of all. Have you ever been given a second chance you were certain you didn't deserve? Have you ever looked across a room, or a beach, or a lifetime, and seen someone still believing in you when you had stopped believing in yourself? If you have, then you already know what Red felt in that moment. If you haven't yet, close your eyes tonight and imagine someone is walking toward you across warm sand, arms open, smile wide, saying without words, you made it. You're home now. Let that image stay with you, soft and bright, long after my voice has faded. The waves are very quiet now, only the smallest hush-hush against the shore, the same rhythm as your breathing. In, out, slower, slower, perfect. Andy and Red are somewhere out there still, fixing up an old boat, drinking cold beer under stars that never ask questions. And you are here, safe, warm, held by the night itself. There is nothing left to do, nothing left to carry. Hope is a good thing, maybe the best of things, and no good thing ever dies. Not really. It just waits, patient as ocean, gentle as rain, until you are ready to feel it again. Let the last wave take you now. Drift, 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 all the way down into the softest, deepest sleep you've ever known. I'll be right here if you need me again tomorrow night. Good night, my friend. Good night.